I wanted to give everybody a quick overview of some important aspects to what you need to do to complete the final project. So the final project proposal obviously just needs to be a short little document that has a diagram that has some AWS terminology and actual icons. So when you do the project proposal, just make sure that your diagram does include some valid images that you would expect to see. If you use the one site that I provided to you, um, diagrams.io, you can generate a class pretty easily and a chart. There's actually in here somewhere. You can come in here and you can choose from various, there's already templates here for AWS that you can start with. And once you have this document, it has all of so this tool here is a free tool that will allow you to create diagrams, and they have the AWS logos and images. So your diagram should have these logos here again to match whatever your design is. You can search for them. If you go to search shapes and you type in AWS, you can find matching examples here, and you're free to use the ones that you find here to do, for example, compute. If you go to compute, you'll see ones here for standard EC2 instances. So it's an easy tool to use. So definitely make sure that you use this tool or a tool like it so that the diagram you come up with is kind of more professional. So that's the one thing. I have provided a number of different project ideas. You are not required to use these project ideas. These are just ideas that you can start with. If you see something in here you want to use, be my guest, you're able to use it. If you see something that inspires you to do something different, that's fine too, as long as it's not something that's not tasteful and it just must include, your solution just must include all of the required services. The services themselves are mentioned specifically in the project overview. Okay, so your project must include Lambda, DynamoDB, S3, SQS, and API Gateway. So those are the services that you must include. You're free to include other ones, but your solution should include those. All right. Second part of this is that we are going to be using something called AWS Academy Learner Lab. Okay. And what this allows us to do is allows us to use AWS, but it doesn't require that we actually sign up for a true AWS account because when you do that, you have to give them a credit card. So this is really an educational site, and AWS Academy Learner Lab is just a way for us to be able to get into AWS without actually having to purchase or sign up for an official account. If you want to use an official account, if you have one already, be my guest. You're free to do that. If you don't already have one and you're not interested in signing up, then this would be the way to go. Okay. So this Learner Lab, you could see from within our dashboard. So you have to log into AWS Academy. You should also have gotten an invite. You might be using it already for other things, but the one you want to see here is a course that says AWS Learner Lab. Again, the numbers here might be different. You might see a different screen. I have some extra courses. So this is the course you're going to use to develop your project. Again, if you don't already have an AWS account that you want to use. It's very simple to get started. This is really nothing more than a jumping off point to get back into AWS. So what you're going to do is you're going to come up here to modules, and you should read some of this information here. It's definitely beneficial to read the student guide, just get comfortable with it. But basically what you're going to do is you're going to come down here to this Launch AWS Academy Learner Lab link. You're going to click that, and that's going to take you into the lab area. Okay. Now everybody is given a budget of $50, right? So when you first start out, you'll be zero. We should not spend more than a few dollars, but you should not approach the $50 budget. If you get to that point, let me know. There's probably something that you're doing that might be eating up that cost, because the more things you create in AWS, the more it's going to charge you, right? But for the things we're going to be doing, it shouldn't be more than a couple dollars unless you're experimenting with other things. Okay, so just pay attention to this. When you get to about 50%, then you'll get an alert. But again, I don't anticipate that going very high. Also on the right hand side, this tells you what your limitations are. Okay, now I mentioned this is going to give us access to AWS Academy or AWS, but it's going to be in a sandbox learning environment. So some of the services are restricted. Okay, and this document here will explain to you exactly what their restrictions are. For the services that are part of the required pieces of this project, you should be fine. Okay, there's one gotcha, and that has to do with the fact that you need to use an execution role when you're creating Lambda functions. And when you create a Lambda function, you have to make sure that you choose the existing lab role rather than trying to create a new role. When you try to create a Lambda function, if you don't change it, it's going to give you an error message telling you, hey, you don't have rights to create a role. You have to go back and you have to change the execution role on the creation steps and just make sure you choose lab role. That is a predefined role that gives you access to all the services the way you need them to be accessed, okay? So that's part of the Lambda configuration. And that's mostly where students find problems, right? Anywhere else where you need to provide resources or access, then you may need to also choose that same role, okay? So you'll and I have an announcement which I also talk about in the course that mentions that. The way this is going to work is you are going to come in here. Now, when you first come in, you're going to see this little icon here that says AWS, and it's going to be red. That means the lab is not running, okay? So you actually have to start the lab. When you hit the start button, you're going to see this spinning here, and immediately this button is going to turn to yellow. This will take anywhere from a couple minutes to, I've seen it go as long as 10 minutes before it actually gets to a green button. So you have to kind of wait. And what's happening is it's setting up everything that you need. What I found is the first time you do this is usually the longest. After that, it's a little bit shorter once you've done this one time. This lab will run for 4 hours, okay? And you'll actually even see over here that you'll see a countdown clock, that it's actually 4 hours. If you think that you're going to be using it longer than 4 hours, you can always come back in here and hit this button again and it'll restart the clock. But this is going to count down to 0. When that gets to 0, what's going to happen is AWS is automatically going to shut everything down to save money. All right. If that happens, all you have to do is come back in here and restart the lab. Everything you've done will stay. Okay. These are long-running labs. Okay. Unlike the ones we were doing for some of our short labs for like within the developer course, where you start a lab, you do something, if you come back later, it's not there. That is not how this lab works. Okay, this is a long-running lab. It's intended to be your place to put things that you want to work on for days or weeks or however long it takes you to get your project done. Okay, the only thing you have to remember is that it shuts itself down automatically after 4 hours unless you come back in here and hit this button again. And you can kind of see I'm already at 3:59. All right, but if I hit Start Lab again, it'll jump back. It should jump back over to 4 hours. Okay, but everything stays. You don't lose anything. You can work on it at your pace. Do a little bit at a time. Every time you come in, you're going to come in here and do this. All right. A couple things I also point out is that you can always end the lab yourself. So if you're done, you can hit this button and conserve money. Generally, this amount of money that you've used will kind of clock up after about 24 hours or so. You're not going to see the immediate change in amount of money. It might be a day or so before you actually see that, oh, you spent $1, you might spend $2, whatever it happens to be. When you end the lab, it's just going to shut it down now versus waiting 4 hours. The other thing I'll point out here, there's a README file. That's what we're seeing here. You can get the AWS details. You shouldn't really need to see any of the details, but they're there if you needed to do some special things. We don't have to typically do that for what we're doing for our project, but that's what that is. This button here, reset. Okay, do not hit reset unless you have a need to do that, because what that does is that actually does clear everything. You should only use that if you're running into some strange problem and you can't get past it. All right, so reset is like blowing away everything you've done, and it's not recoverable once it resets your environment. You will get a warning message if you hit that button. It's not going to just let you do it. It's going to, well, I'll show you. If I hit reset, it's going to warn you. This is going to delete everything. Okay. So you only hit that one if you really have to get rid of everything and you want to start completely over, and you don't want any of the stuff you were working on before to be left around inside of AWS. That's when you would hit that button. Otherwise, you're just going to hit Start Lab or End Lab. And once this turns green, as it is for me now, you're now at this point going to use this button to actually get into AWS. Again, this whole environment here is really a jumping off point to get you into a special console that you can use, okay, for our project. So I'm going to click this button, and it should log you in. You should get to a console. You should see your information up here, Vocal Apps, something here, right? This is kind of how you know you're in our environment. Be careful with this, because if you're already logged into AWS in some other way, if you have a full account and you're logged in and you go over and you click that green button, it's going to tell you, hey, you have to log out first. So just be cognizant of the fact that make sure you're actually, if that happens to you, make sure that you're actually in this lab. You'll see the word Voc Labs, let you know, oh, I'm actually in one of the labs, right? If you don't see something that looks like that, there's a chance you actually are using your real AWS account. Again, if you have one, you may not, right? And some students don't, which is fine. Once you come in here, you're going to see any of the services that you were using before. If you have any, you might not see recently used lists if it's the first time. Okay, so but from here, you can get into all the services. You can get into EC2, you can get into S3, you can go over to Lambda, just by simply typing in Lambda, you can get to that service, right? You can create Lambda functions, you can create EC2 instances, you can create API gateways. All of that is available to you. You're going to see that there's already going to come predefined with some functions. You don't have to worry about them. Just leave those as is. Those are part of the lab environment themselves. So you won't ever touch those or change them. But you can create your own functions, right? And this is where you would do that. And I'll just show you also, this is where you need to be careful with the execution role. So do not leave it as create a new role, because that's going to give you an error message. Instead, you're going to use an existing role, and you're going to pick lab role here. That will make sure that you have that permission set correctly, and it will let you create the function. If you try to use this one, you will get an error message if you try to create it. And I'll kind of show you what it's going to look like here. If I do this and just try to create this, you're going to see that eventually I'm going to get this error, right? Access denied. I can't create roles, right? So that's because I have this button select, but if I choose this one, then I won't get that error message, okay? So what you're going to do is you're going to work in this environment. You are going to create your solution around however you have built it, and you're going to use this environment to do everything. If you have any problems and have questions about how this works, please reach out. I'd be happy to help you. I hope this helps you get started and hopefully reduces the confusion. I'll point out also there is a sandbox in the AWS, the other AWS account. So just be careful when we're using the lab. Which one is it? The developer course. Just make sure that you aren't choosing the sandbox in there. It has to be coming from the course you see here. It has to be coming from this AWS Academy Learner Lab. Do not use the cloud developer one to do anything. It has to be done through this lab. Otherwise, you're going to get yourself into trouble, because those are short-lived labs, and you want something that's going to stick around. So that is the whole purpose of this Learner Lab. Okay. Hope that helps. If you have any questions, please reach out.